Okay, let's dive right into this. February 1948. We're in the Strait of Malacca. That's the super narrow, heavily trafficked waterway right between Malaysia and Indonesia. It's a completely clear day, the sea is calm, the wind is perfectly peaceful. But then out of nowhere, American and British ships passing through pick up a deeply unsettling SOS. And it wasn't just your standard distress call. It was a frantic Morse code transmission that would kick off a 77-year-old enigma regarding a ship called the SS Oaring Maiden. This haunting phrase right here was the sudden, final transmission received by those ships, cutting right through the silence before absolute dread set in. Now, you might be wondering why Morse code? Well, our source notes that even back then, Morse code was incredibly reliable. It cut right through atmospheric interference like fog or humidity, way better than voice radio. This transmission started with standard SOS distress signals, but then it pivoted to a frantic message. It read, "Probably second officer is dead. Other crew members are also dead. Do not give medical advice. SOS, request urgent help from warship." After a brief pause, the ship transmitted its exact coordinates and then sent those two final chilling words, "I die." And after that, operators tried desperately to respond, but they were met with just a prolonged, heavy silence. And this vividly highlights the terrifying paradox of the whole situation. An American merchant ship, the Silver Star, was the closest vessel, so it diverted its course to go help. When they finally spotted the Orang Mandan through their binoculars, they noticed the exterior was in totally pristine condition. I mean, it was floating silently, zero visible damage, taking on no water. But there was no steam coming from the chimney and absolutely no movement on deck. So the Silver Star's captain sends a rescue team aboard, and they step into an absolute nightmare. The interior was a mass graveyard. The entire crew was wiped out, their bodies were stiffened, and their faces were frozen in pure terror, literally with their eyes and mouths wide open. They found the captain dead at his post, the officers dead on the bridge, and, get this, even the ship's dog was dead, frozen in this aggressive, rigid posture. This immediately builds into a rapid timeline of terror. We go from those initial SOS distress calls right into the Silver Star altering its course and the boarding party discovering the massacre. Now here's where the window for any real physical investigation just violently closes. Because the bodies had no visible wounds, no blood, no scratches, no signs of a struggle whatsoever, the rescue team decided, okay, we need to tow this ship to a nearby port to figure out what happened. But the second they started attaching the tow ropes, cargo hold number 4 started smoking. A fire broke out, and it spread so insanely fast that the boarding party had to evacuate immediately back to the Silver Star. And thank goodness they did, because moments after they reached safety, a sudden massive explosion ripped the SS Orang Madan apart, sending its wreckage and all of its dark secrets straight to the bottom of the ocean forever. Before we move on to the theories, there's one specific, eerie detail from the boarding party's account that really grounds us in the terrifying reality of those final moments. When the rescue team reached the radio room, they found the radio operator exactly where he had transmitted that final message. He was dead, right? But his stiff fingers were still frozen directly on the Morse code key. The sheer suddenness of whatever killed them was so absolute, so instantaneous, that he didn't even have time to pull his hand away from the transmitter. So with the ship literally swallowed by the ocean, all the physical evidence is gone. All we are left with is the eyewitness testimony of the Silver Star's crew. And this forces us into a really fascinating pivot. Because there's no wreckage to examine, skeptics have raised a pretty jarring question. Did the SS Orang Madan even exist in the first place? Without a hull to inspect or bodies to autopsy, we have to leave the ocean behind and start hunting for paper trails. Section 1. Peeling the onion. Fact, fiction, and missing records. We're going to transition away from the terrifying eyewitness narrative for a second and take an impartial, logical look at the history to see what the documents, or, the lack of documents, can actually tell us. Now, the main argument skeptics use lies in the official paperwork. Specifically, the ship's name was completely missing from the Lloyd's shipping register, which is basically the Holy Grail, comprehensive record of all international shipping. Because of that glaring omission, a lot of people quickly dismiss the entire event as a hoax or a fabricated story. But historians who've dug into this specific era point out a really crucial piece of context. This was right after World War II, and during that chaotic post-war period, it was actually super common for vessels to operate totally unregistered or under fake names, especially if they're involved in illegal smuggling activities. And those smuggling theories, They gained some major traction a few years down the line. Fast forward to 1954, and Dutch newspapers started publishing articles detailing the whole incident. They even included interviews with people claiming to be former crew members who had worked on the vessel previously. According to these guys, the SS Orang Medan was indeed being used to smuggle illicit goods, which honestly perfectly explains why it was kept off the official registries. But here's the catch. Despite these newspaper reports acting as great historical clues, whenever investigators tried to use them to track down the actual owner of the ship, they hit a massive brick wall. The owner remained entirely untraceable, which just deepened the whole mystery even further. Which brings us to Section 2, the covert cargo hypothesis. If this ship really was smuggling illegal goods, we have to ask the obvious question: what kind of cargo could simultaneously kill an entire crew without leaving a single scratch and then cause a ship-obliterating explosion just a few hours later? Well, it turns out there's a scientific answer that fits the puzzle almost perfectly. The most logical theory presented in our source material points to a mixed cargo of potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin. Experts point out that if potassium cyanide mixes with salty seawater, it triggers a chemical reaction that releases a highly toxic, totally invisible gas. Breathing that in attacks the lungs and causes rapid death by asphyxiation. That completely explains the sudden woundless massacre and those frozen expressions of terror. On the flip side, you have nitroglycerin, which is a highly volatile explosive. If it isn't stored properly, it can literally spontaneously combust. This elegantly accounts for that sudden fire in Cargo Hold 4 and the massive explosion that ultimately sank the ship. But come on, where would a random merchant ship get its hands on such deadly chemicals right after World War II? Well, some researchers point to a pretty chilling geopolitical theory known as the Unit 731 connection. Unit 731 was a notorious Japanese military unit that conducted absolutely horrific biological and chemical experiments during the war. Now, the theory goes that after Japan was defeated, the US government secretly tried to acquire these chemical weapons and the scientists who made them. We're not saying this is definitely what happened, but you can see how the dots connect. The idea is that the Orang Medan was chartered for a covert mission to smuggle these secret weapons, operating off the books to dodge international detection. Tragically, terrible safety standards led to a fatal accidental leakage that wiped out the crew, before the volatile cargo ultimately destroyed the evidence entirely. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this is just some wild, fringe internet conspiracy, I want you to consider the number 45. That is the exact number of years the CIA kept a specific document regarding the SS Orang Medan completely classified. Written way back in May of 1958, this letter was locked away in secret intelligence files until it was finally declassified and released to the public in 2003. And that document, which you can actually still go read on the CIA's website today, contains a comprehensive breakdown of the tragedy. I actually want to read this exact excerpt from that declassified letter for you just to give you a sense of it. The author writes, "I feel sure that the SS Orang Medan tragedy holds the answer to many of these unsolved airplane accidents and unsolved marine mysteries. I think this just brilliantly illustrates the enduring weight of this whole thing. It wasn't just cheap ghost story fodder. It was a legitimate puzzle that was being discussed, analyzed, and vaulted away at the very highest levels of international intelligence." Which kind of leaves us right here. Whether it was a deadly leak of smuggled potassium cyanide, some massive covered-up operation involving horrific WW2 chemical weapons, or honestly, something else entirely, the evidence is gone. We have these really logical theories. We have the declassified CIA letters, and of course, we have the terrified accounts from the Silver Star's crew. But at the end of the day, nature and fate intervened, swallowing the only true physical evidence into the crushing depths of the Strait of Malacca. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. Despite all our modern advancements and brilliant scientific theories, will the ocean ever truly surrender the final truth of the SS Orang Medan? Think about that, and keep questioning what lies beneath the surface.